Now we get to the defensive side of the ball here, and we see some more. We see some new. This is the first time we really see some Washington State kind of DNA and where the offers are coming from. Troy Malo from Denver. Iowa State does not typically get a lot out of Denver. Now, granted, they did get Miles Purchase and Bo Freeler out of Colorado, but generally speaking, Iowa State does not recruit the West very much outside of going to California here and there. Iowa State does not typically recruit West very often. So, it's worth noting that they went, and he's a decent little prospect too. I'm kind of curious what his offers look like. Arizona State, Colorado, Iowa State, Kansas. He's got a Michigan offer, Michigan State. He's got an Oklahoma offer, Utah. He's got a very, very nice offer list. Love going after a kid like that especially because Iowa State early on, just because they had to take so many players in the transfer portal. The next couple classes, as far as freshman classes go, Iowa State's going to have a lot of playing time to offer some of these positions. Now, there's a couple that you probably don't have a lot of early playing time, like quarterback. You probably don't have a lot of early playing time that you can offer because you've got it taken care of for the next 2 to 3 seasons. And then you've already got, you got your quarterback from this class, Hudson Curland, who, we did a review on him, whatever it was, a couple months ago or a month ago, whenever he committed. And I really like him. He's got a lot. He's got a lot of natural arm talent that he can rely on. He needs to work on his footwork and things like that. But one off season with a good quarterback coach, and I think Hudson Curland has a very, very high ceiling. At Iowa State. So I think that's the quarterback they don't have a lot to talk about. But I think running back they can potentially have some early playing time available for these 27 guys, because Aiden Flora will graduate. I think next year he graduates because I think he's a junior right now. And you did grab a couple. You got a couple running backs in the freshman transfer, or not transfer class, but the freshman class. But running back, you take one or two every year, and I would say it's not like. Right now, anyways, I don't know that there's a Breece Hall or a Dave Montgomery on the roster that's just going to sit there and bury people for a couple years. I don't know if that there's a guy on the roster right now that's like that. I would love if River Peppers became a guy like that, but we're also, I don't know that we're ever going to really see a true bell cow like those two were again. Maybe, I guess. I mean, pro style offenses don't really utilize the bell cow approach. I mean, even when, the Lions this past year, they have a 2-headed running back with David and Jahmyr Gibbs. And, the bell cow running back is it's not dead, but it's not nearly as popular as it used to be. So I think they've got a lot of snaps coming up that they can offer running backs, especially, which could be the reason that you go after such a highly rated guy at the running back position. Because even if he's got blue blood offers, he's probably going to be sitting behind somebody at a blue blood. Whereas, if he comes to Iowa State, he may just be the guy day one and they just roll with it because he's that good. So they can sell him on that as you are going to have an opportunity to be the dude on day one. So, we'll see. That's it. Some guys really, really care about that. Some guys, they want to just chase the NIL dollars, which is fine. And some guys, they want to just go to the prestigious programs, whatever it is. But I would say we'll have playing time to offer a lot of these. Wide receiver definitely will have playing time to offer. At best, they've got a lot of unproven names. Can a guy like Dominic Overby, make the jump this season and learn how to catch a football? And because he's got the physical tools, the physical tools are obviously there. So, there's a lot of unproven. I think there's raw talent in the room, but right now it's just raw talent. It needs to develop. So, wide receiver will have tons and tons of snaps. Defensive line will be, they're in a pretty good spot right now, but I think you'll have a spot, especially on the interior, to offer going forward. Linebacker, you've got good young talent there, so you maybe not as immediate there. The secondary absolutely will have openings as well. So, Iowa State's got tons and tons of playing time to offer these guys. that that for like Troy in Oklahoma or at Utah or something like that, they may not be able to offer him that. And at 6'3", 238, I mean, he's got size right away. He's got the size right away to be able to do what he needs to do. Couple Kansas guy, another guy here from Washington, Tai Tautolo. Another thing you don't really see at Iowa State often, you don't see the Polynesian players at Iowa State very often. And it'd be nice if they were able to, at the staff with Washington State was able to get inroads in different parts of the country, where you can have access to just a different kind of player than Iowa State's typically had. This guy's name is Uhila Wolfgram, defensive end out of Spanish Fork, Utah. Utah, Washington, Colorado. That's Pac-12 territory. That's Pac-12 recruiting territory. So this kind of stuff. Those are connections from Washington State. So you can really see through this whole thing. You can see DNA from. You can look at all of these pieces and say, this is where this connection is. This is where this connection is. This is where this connection is. We can see the Houston connections. We can see the Arizona connections. We can see the SEC territory connections. We can see where the Pac-12 area we can see where that came from. We can see where the Dakotas and Minnesota and stuff like that. We can see where those are coming from. So it's kind of fun to follow this because we get so used to the last staff pretty much just hit the Rust Belt. So they just hit Iowa over to Ohio, and then up to Michigan a little bit, up to Wisconsin, a little bit up in Minnesota, and the Kansas City area. They pretty much the recruiting area was kind of shaped like a dick, just up here and then straight east with the shaft. But sorry, that's a CF After Dark way to describe that. But that's kind of what it was. But this staff is reaching into all sorts of different kinds of the country. They're really leveraging their connections to different geographic areas. And I'm really excited for how they're going to approach this too, because we just got used to how Matt Campbell and staff recruits these guys, and they're just this staff is recruiting a different kind of player in a different part of the country, and it's fun to follow. It's something new. Caleb Jordan right here. You got another Chandler, Arizona, so that's another Jimmy Rogers connection down there. Defensive line. There's Florida. There's Texas. Like I said, we've gotten some out of Florida, but the Texas stuff is where we can really lean into this we can really lean into our new connections down there. Dwayne Jones is currently a Kansas State commit. I would assume they think they can flip him if they've decided to offer him. I would assume they think they can flip him, but not entirely sure exactly. But go to linebacker, Minnesota, Arkansas, Ohio, Texas. I'm curious. I want to look at a couple of these guys' tape because 6'2", obviously high school linebackers typically aren't, they're typically a little undersized, but with a 4.25, your linebackers need to be quick. They need to have good lateral movement. They need to have good speed because they've got a lot more area to cover. And you're expecting them to chase runs that have gotten bounced to the outside. If it's to the weak side away from your nickel corner. So in general, your 4.25, your linebackers are going to be undersized. So if you look at these, you get 6'2", 200, 205, 190, 200. When they get to college, they'll be in that 220, 230-ish range. Just because you still need more beef than that. You can't be a 190-pound linebacker in the Big 12. That's just not going to work. But you can be a 220-pound linebacker, 225-pound linebacker in the Big 12 as long as you can tackle and you can play physically. As long as you can be physical with that size. 225 at linebacker can play in the Big 12. So we can already see the different kinds of players that they're recruiting here. The Minnesota kid. Yeah. So the Minnesota kid, Blake Benton, he was recruited by the last staff. He's got a crystal ball to Penn State. You'd love to be able to stick around to keep him, but I don't know if they're going to be able to. He's got an Iowa shirt on in his picture and he's got a crystal ball to Penn State. it's not great, not great, not looking great for Iowa State. But we'll see. Obviously, this is still early in the recruiting cycle. They've got Junior Day coming up here in a little while, and I think it's in April. No, it's towards the end of May. They've got a Junior Day. They've got camps during early in the summer that they'll offer a lot more guys there where they can get guys to come to Iowa State and develop some of those relationships too. So, when those camps all happen, you're going to see a lot more offers come out, especially for 2027 and 2028. So, but we go back to the secondary. You got another high-level prospect here, Blake Jenkins out of Katy, Texas. Oklahoma, you got Florida, and you got Texas, and then Oklahoma, and another Texas. They're clearly. It's interesting that the position groups do seem to be fairly well. Like, you can see where they want to try to find speed, because that's where you're going to look in the Oklahoma, Texas type area. That's where you're going to find your speed. So you can see that at the speed positions, running back, receiver, and the secondary, they're really focusing in on that part of the country. And when you got the offensive and defensive line, the linebackers, you're focusing in on the upper Midwest. That's, where those kids come from. So, and I know this is like pointing out stuff that sounds obvious. But recruiting's a weird deal, and and we have a lot of data that goes back to show that just certain parts of the country produce these kinds of players. Quarterbacks pretty much invariably, the best quarterbacks pretty much always come from either Texas or they come from California, Southern California specifically. Really in anywhere along the coast, anywhere between the Bay Area and Los Angeles, which is obviously a large area, but California and Central Texas, especially like Houston, DFW, those two areas produce, like by far the best quarterbacks in the country. As far as just the lineage of quarterbacks from those areas is pretty outrageous. But then you get receivers coming from Texas or Georgia. You've got some of the best linebackers in the country coming from, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, stuff like that. You've got defensive backs and receivers, especially coming from Florida. Offensive line can come from a lot of places. But obviously the upper Midwest cranks out a lot of offensive linemen. So yeah, that's exactly right. DBs, I don't think it would be controversial to say that Florida, generally speaking, produces the best defensive backs in the country. And that's where you get Jontez Williams as a Florida kid. They've gotten lots of guys out of Florida. TJ Tampa, obviously, we've had success down there. You're probably going to continue to have success down there. So, it's not shocking to see them go after these guys in parts of the country that have a legacy of producing these. It's the last staff did take. They took pride in finding diamonds in the rough, which is good. If Iowa State's just not going to be able to wrangle in tons and tons of blue chip prospects, and I think this coaching staff realizes that too. But I think they were this staff, the last staff. I think they really. I think the last staff, maybe almost to a fault, they trust like their guys. If Matt Campbell knows them or someone on the staff knows them, they will give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think this was fairly easily represented. This was fairly easily represented in the specialist situation, especially with kicker. Because pretty much anybody that knows that watches this show knows that there are two major services that rank kickers and punters and long snappers. There's Cole's Kicking, so it's Jamie Cole, and then you've got Chris Saylor. Those are kind of the main two. I mean, there are other services that help rank those, and that kind of train these guys. There are others, but Chris Saylor and Jamie Cole are kind of the big two as far as kickers, punters, and long snappers. And for a number of years, I did a podcast with Cole Netton, former Iowa State kicker, and he was he was a Cole's kicking guy. Jamie Cole's an Iowa State grad. He's still, Jamie Cole still lives lives around central Iowa, even though they do camps all over the place. But, there's bias involved here, but Cole was adamant that Jamie Cole, or that Cole Netton was adamant that Jamie Cole, he does the best job of evaluating and ranking these guys. Campbell's staff very clearly, if you go back and look at rankings and just kind of who was which players were associated with which coach. Campbell's staff was very clearly they were Chris Saylor loyalists. They basically always went with Chris Saylor guys. And we saw that didn't always work out. There was a couple, if you think of Iowa State's like good kickers that they had at Iowa State. Now they've had a couple good punters. Tyler Perkins was very good, to his credit. But if you look at like freshman kickers they brought in, obviously Kyle Conradi, sure. Yes. But the best kickers they had were mostly transfers. If you go back to like Garrett Owens, then you go to Andrew Mevis, those guys were transfers in. They weren't freshman recruits. Iowa State's freshman punters and kickers that came from Chris Saylor and long snappers for that matter didn't really pan out. But the staff went with those guys, Jace Gilbert. The staff went with those guys because they were Chris Saylor loyalists. Now, who this staff is loyal to for their specialists, I don't know. But for better or worse, and which is it was kind of either way. The staff's loyalties to different parts of the country, to different loyalty to their way of doing things. It helped them in some ways because it gave them a foundation to build on, but it also held them back in other ways, I think. And so we didn't see that staff go look for certain players in the part of the country where they needed to look for them. And this current staff, Jimmy Rogers' staff, is doing that in ways that the last staff didn't. So they're not, this staff is not just trying to, just do what the last staff did and just, keep going with it. They're doing things their own way, which is great. I think a change of pace is absolutely can be beneficial here. Obviously you are recruiting for a completely different defensive scheme. You could maybe argue that the offense, while it will look a little different potentially, formations wise, it will still largely try to accomplish the same things for the most part. But the defensive scheme is completely different, and you got to have completely different players. And it's been really interesting so far to watch the early returns of the types of guys that this staff is going to recruit for the defense. And I think they're taking some shots on some guys. They're getting aggressive in certain places. And especially at certain position groups where they know that they're going to need a dude. And we're going to keep an eye on it. It's interesting. It's early. Once we get a firmer idea of where some of these guys are going to go and like which ones have a good shot, which one I would say, which ones I would say it has a good shot at, we'll dig into more, film wise. And, especially if there's a commit, we'll look through some film as well. But it's an interesting start. I like some of the names. I like where the areas of this country the staff is going to start on this class, and we will keep an eye on it going forward. There's obviously not a lot going on right now, so if you guys have any questions you want answered, absolutely throw them in the chat right now. We're more than happy to answer those. We've got about 10-15 minutes left or so. When I don't need to necessarily. Did I miss the athletes at the bottom? Oh yes. So safety. You got a guy from Georgia, a couple from Texas, Nebraska. You got a couple guys from Georgia, a couple from Texas. Tishon Poole is he's a 4-star guy. Why Liebentritt from Omaha. So maybe, trying to make some more, inroads back into the Omaha area. I'd be curious to see what Tishon Poole looks like, what kind of shot we've got at him, because he's a high 4-star. I mean, he's got Alabama, Auburn, Florida State, Georgia. This staff, despite being new to the school, is taking some shots at some really high level players. This is a full on. This is a blue chip. This is a blue blood caliber player. We'll see what kind of shot Iowa State has at this, but again, they're going to have playing time to offer these guys. What does the NIL situation look like? Do they have enough NIL available to land a player like this, or to land a Tishon Poole, or to land a Landon Williams Callis? Do they have the firepower NIL wise to land these guys? Who knows? Both of those guys are probably NFL guys, so you can maybe make the argument to them that you're going to make this money down the road pretty much no matter what. As long as you show up and do your thing, you're going to make the money down the road, no matter what. So we'll see. If you want to go with like a state by state breakdown here, Texas leads the way with 11 offers. 6 from Illinois, 5 from Arizona, 5 from Kansas, and then 4 from Georgia, Iowa, Ohio. And then you've got, just a smattering of other ones from other places. But, Texas right there. I mean, getting a couple guys, getting the coach from Houston, helps that out. And this, the staff is reprioritizing one of the best states in the country to pull recruits from, which is great. It's great to see. If you would go back a couple years, let's go back to the 2025 class, since that was the last one that Iowa State had that Iowa State went off. It also should be noted that this staff has so far offered significantly fewer players than the last staff. The last staff made a habit of offering fucking everybody. They offered everyone and their mom. 45 offers to Florida, 18 to Illinois, 16 to Missouri, 11 in Utah. I mean, they offered everyone. But still only 5, the staff that offered everybody only offered 5 kids from Texas. Go back to 2024. Tons and tons of Florida offers, 57. Still only 11 in Texas. I mean, it's good to offer Iowa and Illinois. That's great. There's talent in those states. You should all of the best players in Iowa, they should offer and do all that. But if you don't have at least as many Texas offers as you do Iowa, if not more, you're probably doing something wrong. You're leaving money on the table. And that's not a disrespect to the state of Iowa, but it is. But Texas as a state is like 20 times, it's like 10 to 15 times larger than Iowa, and has a history of producing tons and tons and tons of talent. Here, 53 offers in Florida, 15 in Iowa, only 13 in Texas. They did not prioritize Texas the way they could have, and maybe could have landed some players that could have made a difference in some games. But we go to the 2027 class, and who is the priority so far? Texas. Yeah, Arizona, Georgia, Iowa. They're offering the places that are producing talent, which is great to see. I think it's just the one from California right now, but new recruiting areas, and it's great to see. Iowa State will be in play for more recruits in SEC territory, which is really exciting, because it's there's a reason that SEC schools typically have more talent than most other schools, and that's because the South produces a lot of talent. They just do. Louisiana and Texas and Atlanta and Florida, South Florida especially, the Carolinas produce tons of talent. You got to go where the talent is, and you can get different kinds of players in different parts of the country, but the staff has done a good job reprioritizing and going where the talent is, basically. So